But the primary reason why we're gathered here tonight is to also honor one of our alumni in the most significant way the Academy can, and that's with our 2014 Opus Sancti Thomae medal. And to introduce our 2014 Opus honoree, I want to turn to somebody who knows Mike Ciresi very well, Roberta Walburn. And Roberta, as you join me on stage, I'd like to tell you a little bit about Roberta. She's known Mike as a friend and also worked with him as an attorney for almost 30 years. For her work on both historic and transformative lawsuits, she's been named, along with Mike, to the Minnesota Legal Hall of Fame and is among the most influential attorneys in the history of the state. She has an interesting background, as prior to her career as an attorney, Roberta was a reporter for the Minneapolis Star and Tribune and has also served as a consultant to the World Health Organization in Geneva, Switzerland, and worked in Washington, D.C. as a staff member for Senator Paul Wellstone. She also clerked for the Honorable Miles W. Lord, formerly Chief Judge of the United States District Court for Minnesota. Would you please welcome Roberta Walburn to introduce Mike.
Thank you and good evening. It's a pleasure to be here tonight and to have the honor of making this introduction for Mike. This is a special night for Mike and his family. To be back at the Academy, which did so much to forge his character. And for Mike to be back here among people he has known for so long. I've known Mike, as you've heard, and have had the privilege of working with him for many years. A number of you have known him even longer, since his days at the Academy. Mike has traveled a long road and a high road since those days to reach many summits, including the one here tonight. Mike came up the hard way. His mother died of breast cancer after a long illness when Mike was in the 7th grade. His father, a first-generation immigrant from Sicily, started out by selling fruits and vegetables from a horse-drawn cart. He was a self-made entrepreneur who spoke broken English and who left school after only the 7th grade. But he placed a high value on education for his 3 children, Jerry, Anna, and Mike, the youngest. He also taught his children that there is no such word as can't, that you can achieve anything that you put your mind to. Mike's older brother, Jerry, had gone to the St. Thomas Military Academy, and Mike's dad chose the academy for Mike as well, believing it to be the best school in the Twin Cities. At the academy, Mike learned about leadership and about living life with purpose. These values had been instilled by his family, but they were enhanced at the academy. Mike's years at the academy also deepened and expanded his sense of and commitment to the common good, and his unyielding determination to succeed in life, to move mountains, to run through walls, including literally on the football field at the academy. Football was Mike's passion in high school. Truth be told, becoming a lawyer was only Mike's backup plan. But once the hard truth hit home, that becoming a professional football player actually was a can't, that was one mountain that could not be moved, which of course was quite obvious to everyone except apparently Mike. When the lesson hit home, Mike took what he learned from his family and from the academy and went to college at St. Thomas University and law school at the University of Minnesota, and after learning at the side of his mentor, Solly Robbins, became one of the most acclaimed attorneys in the United States. Mike learned to practice law the old-fashioned way, rolling up his sleeves and taking on virtually every kind of case imaginable. He became a skilled trial lawyer and shot to national fame with the Dalcon Shield cases, representing hundreds of women who had been injured from across the country. He made headlines coast to coast in that litigation when he got a former in-house attorney to testify that the company had destroyed incriminating documents years before by burning them in a furnace. Not long after the Dalcon cases, and still at a relatively young age, Mike gained international fame when the government of India flew literally halfway around the world to hire the kid from St. Paul, the kid from the academy, to represent the country of India and its thousands of injured citizens, injured and killed in the Bhopal gas leak disaster, the largest industrial calamity in the history of the world. During this time, Mike was also rising to the top of the law firm, eventually renamed Robbins, Kaplan, Miller, and Ciresi. He has led the firm into some of the largest and also the hardest and most challenging cases in the world. He practices law with a purpose: to make our community, our nation, and our world a better place, to make a difference, to serve and advance the common good, no matter the odds. He represents the largest corporations in the world, but also individual citizens without means who would have no recourse without a lawyer like Mike, willing to take on their cause as his own. In truth, these are the cases that Mike likes the best, where he can level the playing field for someone in need. He is passionate and courageous and bold and visionary, and relentless and determined. When all appears lost, he is at his inspirational best. High-stakes litigation is brutal, a contact sport like football, just what Mike was looking for. And Mike is fierce in the courtroom. His cross-examinations are ferocious and legendary, yet he practices law with the highest of ethics. And to this day, he still outworks everyone. There are no shortcuts on the long road and the high road. There is no case that better demonstrates Mike's talents and grit and character and determination to promote the common good than the tobacco litigation. After the fact, after the great success of the tobacco case, many people have forgotten or never knew what it was like at the beginning. When Mike led the state of Minnesota and Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Minnesota into this battle, there had been decades, more than 40 years of litigation against the tobacco industry. But no one had ever won or even collected as much as one dime in settlement in all that time. The odds were impossible, but Mike was determined, because it was the highest mountain, because it was the right thing to do. And he was set on doing the case the way that no other lawyer in the country had, taking a road never before traveled by seeking to uncover and expose the conduct of the industry. That meant unearthing the tobacco company's secret documents, millions of documents hidden for decades, that proved the industry's fraud, that proved they had been targeting children with their advertising, and that proved tobacco companies had been manipulating nicotine, the addictive agent in cigarettes. At the start of the case, Mike, who was never exactly shy when he was around opposing counsel, told a room full of tobacco lawyers, "We're coming after your documents like bees to honey." These were mostly East Coast lawyers who were, let's just say, a bit arrogant after their decades of success and coming to Minnesota, their flyover land. Few, if any, of these tobacco lawyers probably believed him that day. But after several years in the trenches, with the tobacco industry hiring more than 30 law firms and at times spending more than $1 million each week just to defend the Minnesota case, they recognized they were fighting a lost cause. The tobacco lawyers asked Mike, "How much? How much money to settle the case?" But Mike and Skip Humphrey at the state of Minnesota and Andy Chikowski at Blue Cross said, "We are not going to settle until the secret documents are released to the public, until the truth is told." And the case did not settle until the end of a long trial and the documents were finally turned over. After the case, Mike has been determined to ensure that its legacy lives on in other ways. He has established the Robbins Kaplan Miller and Ciresi Foundation for Children, a foundation unique among law firms whose mission is to create innovative programs to promote education and equal opportunities for all of Minnesota's children. Mike is as proud of the foundation as anything he has done. Indeed, outside of the courtroom, Mike's contributions to the common good loom just as large. He serves on numerous nonprofit boards, including Children's Hospital, the Minnesota Early Learning Foundation, and the Northside Achievement Zone, and of course, a trustee of the Academy. And Mike and Ann have given back to the community in countless ways with their good deeds and their good works. Mike has traveled many paths since his Academy days. He has won many accolades over the years, but he has never forgotten where he comes from. He has never forgotten all of you who he has met along the way, or the Academy, and no honor is closer to his heart than this. Thank you.
Thank you, Roberta. What a fitting introduction of Mike. And on behalf of the Board of Trustees and the Opus Sancti Thomae Selection Committee, St. Thomas Academy is very proud to honor Michael V. Ciresi as the 2014 recipient of the Opus Sancti Thomae Medal. Mike, would you please join us on stage?
Ole and Lena, oh, I'm sorry. That's for the 50th reunion tomorrow night. Well, aren't we so lucky to have a new headmaster such as Matt Mose? Matt, welcome. And young Mr. Clancy, I should probably sit down right now because you stole the show. What a great job. I am truly humbled beyond what you could imagine to be standing here tonight. 16 of the 25 previous recipients I have been privileged to know. I stand in the glow of their tremendous accomplishments. And I'm so happy that Pat Meiser and Peter and Mary Ritten and Tom Gaynor and of course Michael O'Connell are here tonight. 8 of the previous recipients either taught me or were in the administration of the then St. Thomas Military Academy when I matriculated on the St. Paul campus. Professors Campbell, Jim Keene, Professor Schnell, Cy Turbies, Matt's grandfather, Wally Kurtz, and Archbishop Roach, and the first real librarian I ever knew, Clara Glenn. And of course, Michael O'Connell, who is at our table this evening. Now, I'm lucky because Mike's lips are sealed by the privilege of the confessional. But fortunately, if that should fail, as an insurance policy, I have the Sicilian privilege. And that is very simple. He who speaks shall swim with the fishes. I'd like to thank the committee, obviously, but I want to acknowledge some special people. Roberta, thank you very much, and I think you can only imagine what an intimidating, powerful force she is in a courtroom. Roberta and I have practiced together for 30 years. Everything that I have accomplished in that period of time would not have been accomplished without Roberta. She was the diva of the documents in the tobacco case. My wife, Ann, who's been with me through all of that, working with me and supporting me in every way she ever could. I wouldn't be standing here tonight without her. You're my better angel. You've always given me sage and sensitive advice. And as you know, and those who know you, you're an indomitable spirit, and you have the tenacity of a tiger. I would also like to thank my family. 2 of our children are here tonight. Dominic, with 2 of his children. Carrie, our daughter, and Mitch. And my sister Anna, her husband Rich, and their son Brian. My brother Jerry, his wife Barb, and 2 of his sons, I believe. Just one, Todd. I'm sorry, Todd is the only one here. The rest of our children are spread across the world, from Hong Kong to South Carolina. 8 of our grandchildren are now in those 2 states, or the 1 state, and in Hong Kong. I wish they could be here tonight. I have a number of friends here tonight who went to the academy with me. I'll talk about them a little bit later. And of course, my dear and long-term partner, Elliot Kaplan. Again, my career is a reflection of Elliot's advice, his tenacity, his willingness to let me take risks that could only be imagined. And Elliot, I'll forever be indebted. I'd like to thank this institution, and that's really what I'd like to talk about tonight, and the central and pivotal role it has played in my journey through life. When I was a young 14, I hitchhiked to St. Thomas Academy on Summit Avenue in the summer of 1960 to begin football. I left that campus 8 years later. I wasn't slow. I spent 4 years at the Academy and 4 years at what is now the University of St. Thomas. But when I arrived there on that day, I saw the diversity that I was going to be involved with through my years at the Academy. For as I got out of the car I was hitchhiking from, one of our classmates from Wayzata drove in a Corvette. And then I met the kids from the West Side who lived in houses about as big as the garage from the young man from Wayzata. My guiding principle through my life has been to lead a purposeful life in communion with others to advance the common good. This fundamental value was lovingly planted and nurtured by my family. Roberta mentioned my dad, and he was the smartest individual that I've ever met. And I'm sure, as smart as he was, he'd be a little surprised to see me standing here tonight. That value was fertilized and cultivated during my years at St. Thomas Academy and at the University of St. Thomas. This concept of the common good is embedded in Catholic theology and is reflected in Thomas Aquinas' writings. He wrote that 3 things are important for our salvation. Know what we ought to believe, know what we ought to desire, and know what we ought to do. The Academy and St. Thomas University mission statements reflect those values. Here at the Academy, we strive to discover and develop talents and abilities, teach leadership, and the importance of service to others. At the University of St. Thomas, we say, think critically, act wisely, and work skillfully to advance the common good. This institution, through its faculty, administration, and history, gave me a sense of order and direction that was not fully understood while I was here, but has recurringly served to set the table for the choices I have had and why I moved in certain directions. I have thought often since I received notice of this award and honor. Why did St. Thomas Academy make such an impact on my life? And this reflection has brought clarity to the question of why. First, an extraordinary faculty of the 1960s. I've already mentioned Campbell, Keene, Schnell, Turbeis, Kurtz, to say nothing of Byrne, O'Brien, Gatto, Brown, John Lee, Terry Flynn, Marv Bassett, Klein, and Ridley. Most of these came out of World War II, and they sacrificed financially to teach at the Academy. They constantly challenged us to reach our full potential and held us accountable for our missteps. Now, my friends here might say, why did I leave out Leroy Skip McMahon? It was not by accident. He deserves special mention. Now, for those of you who didn't know Skip, he was the type of guy who, when he said, sit down, you wouldn't look for a chair. There's no question, though, that I wouldn't be where I am today without him. And I want to share with you something personally, and something I don't think I've ever said publicly before. At the end of my sophomore year, and you have to remember, as Roberta pointed out, our mother died when I was young, and she had suffered for 5 years before that. I was in the 7th grade. And breast cancer in those days, as it is today, was brutal, but even more so then because of the lack of any effective treatment. And I watched her die, and I wondered why. Why did this happen to me? Why did all of my other friends have their mother and father? My dad surrounded me with love, his sisters did, but there's still a tremendous vacuum without your mother. That led to sort of a chip on my shoulder. And it may have been good for some of the things that I accomplished, but in other things it wasn't. I didn't take too kindly to the academy when I first arrived. My dad made the selection. In those days, we didn't sit down and say, well, you know, Dad, I want to go here. And, you know, because, you know, it's sort of like today, everybody gets a trophy. When we played, only the winner got the trophy. So, it wasn't a debate. There was no discussion. He said, you're going to the academy. So I went to the academy and immersed myself in sports, but not so much in the military. I can hear you laughing, Mr. Bachmeyer. And I carried this chip on my shoulder, and, you know, they say you have to have this, and I would wear loafers. So that's 5 demerits for being out of uniform. And on and on. Well, at the end of my sophomore year, the administration thought that we should part company. And so I got notice that I was to be parted from the academy. And I thought, this is really great. I now get to go to Washington, down on Rice Street, where all my friends from grade school are. And of course, had I ended up there, I probably wouldn't be here tonight. I'd be someplace else. About 3 days before football practice started that summer, I was home. My dad made me work in his store. He worked 8 to 8, Monday through Friday, and 8 to 10 on Saturdays. And we got home on a Friday night. The phone rang, and it was Skip. And he didn't say, hi, Mike, how are you? Good to talk to you, son. He just said, let me talk to your dad. Wasn't even hello. So I said, Dad, it's Coach McMahon. So I'm listening to the one-sided conversation. Yeah, Skip, I agree, Skip. You're absolutely right, Skip. None of the comments I wanted to hear. And then he said, he'll be there. He put down the phone and he looked at me and he said, you'll be at the academy on Monday for football practice. You're going back to school there. Skip got me back in. He had that kind of power. And I will never forget it. And he never let us forget it. He never, and I mean never let us forget it. My senior year, Skip had retired as coach, and they had this event at the St. Paul Athletic Club in downtown St. Paul, and my classmates will remember this. We're down there, we're sitting there, you know, it's really a wonderful thing, and there's all these folks like you know, contributors to the academy, you know, what the people my dad used to call the big shots, you know. Everybody was there. And Skip gets up and is giving his speech, and at the end of his speech he said, you know, and he was a big man. Skip was his arm was as big as my thigh. Skip's up there, he says, you know, I feel so good tonight, I might even talk to Ciresi. He never let you think you were too important. There's a story about Muhammad Ali. He was sitting in first class in a plane, and the flight attendant came up to him and said, Mr. Ali, would you buckle your seatbelt, please? And he said, Superman doesn't need a seatbelt. And she looked at him and she said, you're right. And Superman doesn't need a plane either. Well, Skip would have not have hesitated to tell Muhammad Ali the same thing. So the faculty, that's part of the why. And we have that type of faculty here today. The second are your classmates. And young Mr. Clancy talked a little bit about that frankly, probably more eloquently than I will. But I have a longer arc of perspective. Here at the Academy, you make lifelong friendships. I mean real lifelong friendships. And with us tonight are Tom Linstroth, Don Bachmeyer, Gary Sirix here. I saw Vince Troy. And then the other half of what they used to call here at the Academy the Gold Dust Twins, Mike Barstow. Some call this fool's gold, but we prefer the Gold Dust Twins. Mike and I have a storied history together. Then there's many of our classmates that have left us. Two that were also teammates I want to mention, and that's Steve Kronk and John Grogan. And the thing about these, what were kids, is that they accepted you. And folks, we were diverse. We weren't diverse in color or race. We were diverse economically. And that's part of the beauty of this institution. I can remember going over and sleeping in Pat Kunz's house on George Street on the west side of St. Paul. And he's the one that had that house that would probably be the size of a garage of Cy Ryan's in Wayzata. But each one of them accepted us, challenged each other, were supportive in both our successes and failures. There is something special about an all-male school. You develop special relationships. Each of our classmates, and particularly this table that sits over here, were there to pick me up when I needed picking up and to kick me in the backside when I needed it. The all-male environment also let us be our goofy selves, as young males, contrary to young females, tend to do. But we grew out of our immaturity with minimal embarrassment. And if you're in a foxhole, and if I was ever in a foxhole, I'd want these three guys that are sitting over here covering my back. And that's very, very unusual. Many times and most times in people's lives, your closest and best friends are made in college. Not true of the Academy. And people never gave up. I'll never forget Mike Barstow. When we were sophomores, we started like 8 sophomores on the football team. We were terrible. But we beat Humboldt in a scrimmage, who won the city championship that year. The conference at that time was called the CCC, and it was probably the best in the state, even better than what was then the Lake Conference. And Cretin beat us 54-0. They had like 8 or 9 kids that went on to Division I or Division II college teams. And the score was 54-0, and Mike and I are sitting there to receive the kickoff on O'Shaughnessy Stadium. I can still see it today. We're on the north goal. And he's looking at me and he says, "What's the matter?" I said, "What's the matter? We're getting the shit kicked out of us. That's what's the matter." And he said, "Don't give up." I said, "Mike, it's 54-0 and there's 2 minutes left." And with a straight face, he looked at me and said, "Wouldn't you like to score the only touchdown?" That is what this place was about. Never, ever, ever give up. Another why. We've got faculty, classmates. The next is another thing that young Mr. Clancy mentioned, was leadership. It was at this institution that the traits and attributes of leadership were ingrained into my being. Decisiveness, accountability, inspiration to inspire others, confidence, honesty, focus and intensity, and empathy. We learn that through the leadership program here at St. Thomas. And as Mr. Clancy pointed out, most of that at that time came from the military, but it also came from every single professor. And I know Terry Flynn is here tonight, and thank you very much, Terry. And Professor Brown is here, who is, I think, 101 years old. Thank you very much, Professor. I remember your favorite saying, "Gee, Prof, I didn't get that." "Oh, it gets me right here, Mr. Ciresi." But then he'd tell you how to get it. There was a sergeant, a staff sergeant that we had our senior year. And this will tell you something about the academy. In those days, we had servicemen who were on duty. This was their assignment. And Max Bilke was the sergeant for our company. At the end of the Vietnam War, Max Bilke was the last soldier you saw getting on the helicopter on the roof of the U.S. Embassy. And on 9/11, Max Bilke was killed in the Pentagon. He was an extraordinary guy, and one I think all of us remember fondly. And he taught us leadership. In the final analysis, then, that is the why. The faculty, the classmates, the leadership. I learned to never, ever give up. I think I learned what Churchill meant. He was once told that defeat is a blessing in disguise. Winston looked and he said, "If it is, the disguise is perfect." And how right he is. We learned that from defeat, you learn how to win. I learned teamwork. No one is an island unto themselves, and nothing of value, nothing is accomplished alone. The whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And think of that for a minute in the context of athletic events. An athlete may have certain goals. I want to get X number of yards. I want to score a touchdown. I want to intercept, whatever. But those goals mean nothing unless together you accomplish something, which is a win. We learn that here at the Academy, the essence of teamwork, and it's served me throughout my life. I learned you never, ever compromise your values or your ethics. And I learned to serve the common good. So for all the parents and grandparents in the room, that, in my judgment, is the why of the Academy. It's the reason you entrust your sons and grandsons and nephews to this institution. It's the message that we should spread throughout our community of this great and enduring institution. Finally, I learned what Hubert H. Humphrey described in another way. And I learned this here at the Academy. Vice President Humphrey said, "I'd rather live 50 years as a tiger than 100 as a chicken." We all learn to be tigers here at the Academy. I want to share one final anecdote with you. When I ran for the Senate back in 2008, which was another folly, but that's a whole nother story. We were campaigning, Ann and I were in greater Minnesota, and Don Bachmeyer and Mike Barcelo were along. And it was one of the most surreal and amazing events of the campaign. Ann and I still talk about it. Here I am working part of the room, and I look over, and there's Mike and Don. And Don, some of you may have seen him here tonight. You thought maybe Thomas Jefferson or Moses showed up. Don, could you stand up, please? Just stand up, Don. There's Don Wagner. Thank you. And those two were working the room like polished politicians, and they had no idea what they were talking about. Nothing. So that, I guess, we also learned here at the Academy. If you don't know what you're talking about, at least make them think you know what you're talking about. So thank you all for coming and for all you do for the Academy, and Godspeed to all of you.